Unwanted? No more. The Wyoming sun beat down merciless on the wooden platform where 5 children stood like cattle awaiting slaughter. Sweat carved tracks through the dust on their faces as men in the crowd shouted numbers, cold calculations of worth measured in labor and years. When rough hands reached for the youngest boy, 10-year-old Lena Crowley stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise like a whip crack. "We ain't livestock." Laughter rippled through the assembly. Too many mouths, too much trouble. The auctioneer's gavel hung suspended in the scorching air, and hope evaporated faster than morning dew on sun-baked earth. If you want to see how these 5 unwanted children find their way home, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The town of Bitter Creek, Wyoming wore its name honest. Nothing soft grew here, not the scrub grass that clung to cracked earth, not the people who carved lives from unforgiving land, and certainly not mercy for children with nowhere to go. Lena Crowley had learned that truth 6 months ago when fever took their mother and left 5 children standing over a grave with empty pockets and emptier futures. The town's solution arrived swift and practical. The summer auction, where orphans and unwanted children were placed with families willing to take them. Placed. That's what they called it, like arranging furniture. Now she stood on that platform with her siblings, the rough wood hot enough to burn through her thin shoes. Her dress, the same one she'd worn to Mother's funeral, hung loose on a frame that had forgotten what full meals felt like. Beside her, 9-year-old Thomas kept his shoulders square despite the trembling in his jaw. 7-year-old Mary pressed against Lena's side, her small hand gripping fabric like a lifeline. The twins, 5-year-old Ivy and James, stood close together as they always did, their identical dark eyes watching the crowd with unnerving stillness. "Lot 17," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the assembly gathered in the town square. 5 Crowley children, ages 10, 9, 7, and twins aged 5. Healthy stock, willing workers. Stock. The word settled in Lena's chest like a stone. A man in the front row leaned toward his companion. "Take the older boy maybe, but 5? Who's got room for 5 extra mouths?" "The older girl looks capable," another voice offered. "Good for kitchen work, watching younger ones." "Splitting them makes sense," someone else agreed. "Boys to farm work, girls to household service." The words washed over Lena like the heat, oppressive, inescapable. She'd known this moment was coming, had lain awake nights trying to prepare herself, but knowing and enduring proved different animals entirely. Thomas shifted beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "Lena, stand tall," she murmured back. "Don't let them see fear." The auctioneer gestured toward them. "Who'll start the bidding? Strong children, all of them. The oldest girl can read and write." "I'll take the boys," a voice called out. Lena recognized him, Jacob Hutchins, who ran a freight operation outside town. Hard man with a harder reputation. $2 each for the older 2. "Now hold on," another man interjected. "I could use the girl. Kitchen help, mending. $3. They weren't even pretending anymore. Lena felt Thomas go rigid beside her, felt Mary's grip tighten until her small fingers dug into skin. The twins remained eerily quiet, their matching gazes fixed on something in the distance only they could see. "We stay together," Lena's voice cut through the murmuring crowd, clear and sharp as breaking glass. The auctioneer frowned down at her. "Now, girl, you don't get to—" "We stay together," she repeated, louder this time. "We're not livestock you can divvy up according to convenience." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the assembly. A woman near the front shook her head. "Someone should teach that one proper respect." "Spirit like that needs breaking," another agreed. Lena felt rage kindle in her chest, hot and bright. She'd watched her mother work herself to bone trying to keep them fed. She'd held Mary through nightmares after the fever took their father 2 years prior. She'd changed the twins' clothes and taught Thomas his letters, and kept this family together through everything that tried to tear them apart. She would not, could not, let them be divided now. "The girl's right, troublesome," the auctioneer said, though uncertainty had crept into his tone. "Perhaps better to separate them. Ensure proper discipline. I'll take them." The voice came from the back of the crowd, quiet but carrying a weight that made heads turn. Lena couldn't see past the wall of bodies, but she watched people shift, creating a path. The man who emerged looked carved from the same hard country that surrounded them. Tall, with shoulders broad enough to block sun, he wore dusty range clothes and a hat pulled low against the glare. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples. A face weathered by years of Wyoming wind, marked by a scar that ran along his jawline. But it was his eyes that caught Lena's attention, gray as storm clouds, and just as turbulent. "All 5? The auctioneer's surprise was evident. "Mr. Stone, that's quite I said, "I'll take them." The man, Stone, didn't raise his voice, but something in it made the auctioneer swallow his objection. "All 5, together. What's the price?" The auctioneer recovered quickly, scenting opportunity. "Well now, 5 children represents considerable. Name a number." A pause stretched out, tension thick as the summer heat. Finally, $20 for all 5. Lena heard Mary's sharp intake of breath. $20 was more money than they'd seen in a year. It was also a fortune for children nobody wanted. Stone pulled a worn leather wallet from his coat without hesitation. He counted out bills with steady hands, placing them on the auctioneer's table with deliberate precision. The crowd murmured, surprise, speculation, suspicion. "You understand," the auctioneer said. "You're taking responsibility for all 5, their care, their keeping, their conduct. I understand what I'm buying." Stone's voice held an edge now, sharp enough to cut. "We done here?" Papers were signed. Money exchanged hands. Through it all, Lena kept her siblings close, her mind racing. Who was this man? Why would anyone pay that much for 5 orphans everyone else wanted to split apart? Nothing in her experience suggested good reasons. Stone turned to them finally, his gaze sweeping across all 5 children with an expression Lena couldn't read. "You have belongings to collect?" "We have nothing," Lena said flatly. "Just what we're wearing." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. He nodded once. "Wagons outside. Let's go." The walk through town felt eternal. People stared, whispered behind hands. Lena held Mary's hand tight and kept the twins close while Thomas walked beside her, his young face set in grim determination. Stone moved ahead of them, his long stride forcing them to hurry. The wagon waited at the edge of the square, sturdy construction, good horses. Expensive. Whatever else this man was, he wasn't poor. "Climb in," Stone said, his back to them as he checked the harness. Lena hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. Thomas looked at her, question written clear in his eyes. The twins waited, patient as always. Mary trembled. "Where are you taking us?" Lena demanded. "Lena." Stone turned, and for the first time she saw something like emotion crack through that weathered exterior. Exhaustion, maybe. Or pain worn smooth by time. "My ranch. 3 hours northwest." He gestured to the wagon bed. "There's water in the canteen, shade cloth if the sun gets too fierce. I won't hurt you, any of you. You have my word on that." "And what's the word of a stranger worth?" Lena challenged. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent. "Fair question. You'll have to decide that for yourself, but right now your choices are limited to this wagon or back on that platform. So what's it going to be?" The truth of it struck hard. Lena looked at her siblings, at Thomas trying so hard to be brave, at Mary's tear-streaked face, at the twins whose silence worried her more than tears ever could. Then she looked back at the town square where the auction continued, other children being picked over, divided, distributed. "We stay together," she said. "That's the only way this works," Stone replied. Lena helped the younger ones into the wagon bed, then climbed up herself. Thomas settled beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers. Solidarity and comfort, both. Stone swung up to the driver's seat with practiced ease, gathering the reins. "Hold on," he said, and clicked his tongue. The horses moved forward, and Bitter Creek began to fall away behind them. The first hour passed in near silence. The sun climbed higher, turning the wagon bed into an oven despite the shade cloth Stone had provided. Lena watched the landscape roll past, endless brown grass, distant mountains sharp against cloudless blue. The occasional stand of cottonwoods marking where water ran, like everything else in this country. She studied Stone's back, trying to read something from the set of his shoulders, the way he handled the reins. He drove with easy competence, adjusting their course to avoid the worst of the ruts, keeping the pace steady but not punishing. "You're wondering why," he said suddenly, not turning around. Lena stiffened. "Wondering what?" "Why I'd pay $20 for 5 children I don't know." The thought had occurred. Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I had a brother once. Younger. When our parents died, I was supposed to look after him. I was 16, thought I knew everything. Took work on a ranch down south. Left him with a family I barely knew because the money was good, and I was too proud to ask for help." He paused, and Lena saw his hands tighten on the reins. Found out 6 months later, they'd worked him near to death and sold him to a mining operation when he couldn't keep up. By the time I tracked him down, Stone's voice went flat, empty. Took me 3 weeks to find where they'd buried him. He was 12 years old. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, charged with old grief. Mary had gone still, listening. Even the twins seemed to focus on Stone's words. "That was 15 years ago," Stone continued. "Built my ranch, made my money, but nothing fills that hole. Nothing brings him back." He finally turned, meeting Lena's eyes. "When I heard about the auction, heard they were talking about splitting children up, sending them to whoever bid highest," he shook his head. "I can't save my brother, but maybe I can do for you what I couldn't do for him." "Keep us together," Lena said softly. "Keep you together," Stone confirmed. "Feed you, house you, let you grow up as a family should. That's all I'm offering. Nothing more, nothing less." Thomas spoke for the first time since leaving town. "What do you want in return?" Smart boy, Lena thought. Always the right questions. Stone considered this. "Honesty. And eventually, when you're old enough, help around the ranch if you're willing. But that's years away. Right now, all I want is for you to feel safe." "Why should we trust you?" Lena challenged. "You shouldn't. Not yet." Stone turned back to the road. "Trust is earned, not bought. I just paid for the chance to earn it." The answer surprised her. Most adults expected immediate obedience, automatic gratitude. This man understood the difference between compliance and trust. Maybe, just maybe, they'd been lucky after all. The sun crept toward afternoon. Mary fell asleep against Lena's shoulder, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. The twins sat close together, their dark heads bent in whispered conversation no one else could hear. Thomas watched the landscape pass, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Stone?" Lena said eventually. "Just Stone." "Stone, then. How big is your ranch?" "Big enough. 3,000 acres, give or take. Run cattle mostly, some horses. Main house, barn, few outbuildings. Creek runs through the north section. Good water year-round." "You run it alone?" "Have a foreman, Jack Morrison. Known him 20 years. Few ranch hands that come and go depending on season. But the house is just me." He paused. "Was just me. And now you're bringing home 5 children." Lena couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "Just like that. Just like that. What will people say?" Stone's laugh was short, bitter. "People already say plenty about me. I keep to myself, don't attend church socials, turn down half the eligible women in 3 counties. They've called me everything from hermit to worse. This won't change much." Lena absorbed this. A wealthy, reclusive rancher who avoided society, who'd lost his brother to the same kind of system that nearly swallowed them, who was willing to take on 5 orphans without thought for reputation or convenience. It still didn't make complete sense, but then precious little in life did. "There," Stone said, pointing ahead. "Home." Lena sat up straighter, following his gesture. In the distance, nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered hills, buildings emerged from the landscape. A substantial 2-story house, painted white with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. A large barn, corrals, various outbuildings arranged with practical precision. Trees, actual trees, not scrub, provided shade. The creek Stone mentioned glinted silver in the sunlight. It looked like something from a picture book. Too good to be real. The wagon rolled up the long drive, and Lena saw details emerge. Gardens beside the house, well tended despite the summer heat. Washing lines strung between posts. A dog emerged from beneath the porch, some kind of cattle dog, black and white, barking announcement of their arrival. "Quiet, Bear," Stone called, and the dog subsided to alert watching. A man stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. Older than Stone by maybe 10 years, with iron gray hair and a weathered face that suggested a lifetime of outdoor work. He stopped short when he saw the wagon's contents. "Boss?" His voice carried clear confusion. Stone set the brake and climbed down. "Jack, these are the Crowley children. They'll be staying with us." Jack's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Staying, all five. All five. You got room in that house for—" "I'll make room." Stone's tone allowed no argument. He turned to the children, extending a hand to help them down. "Come on, let's get you inside, out of this heat." Lena went last, after ensuring her siblings were safely on solid ground. Stone's hand was calloused, strong, and surprisingly gentle as he steadied her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion that lived there permanent as scars. "Jack," Stone said, "would you mind seeing to the horses? I'll make introductions proper later." "Sure thing, boss." Jack was still staring at the children like they'd sprouted from the ground. I'll just do that." Stone led them toward the house, the dog falling into step beside him. "This is Bear," he said. "Looks fierce, but he's gentle with children. Had him since he was a pup." Mary, brave despite everything, reached out to pet the dog. Bear's tail wagged, and he licked her hand with careful affection. A smile, the first Lena had seen in weeks, crossed her sister's face. The porch stairs creaked under their weight. Stone opened the front door, and cooler air washed over them, blessed relief from the afternoon heat. He stepped aside, letting them enter first. The interior matched the exterior's promise. Clean, well-maintained, simply furnished but comfortable. A large main room with a stone fireplace, kitchen visible through a doorway, stairs leading to the second floor. Windows open to catch any hint of breeze. It smelled like lemon oil and leather and coffee. Lived in but cared for. 5 bedrooms upstairs, Stone said. You can each have your own or share however you prefer. Bathroom has running water. I put in a pump system few years back. Towels in the cupboard, soap by the sink. He moved toward the kitchen. You must be hungry. Why are you doing this? Lena interrupted. Really, the truth. Stone paused, his back to them. When he turned, the expression on his face was raw, unguarded in a way she suspected was rare for him. Because I can, he said simply. Because I have the money and the space and the knowledge that children shouldn't be sold like livestock or split apart because it's convenient. Because 15 years ago I failed someone who needed me, and that failure has lived in my chest every day since. His voice roughened. You don't have to trust me, Lena. You don't have to like me, but you're safe here, all 5 of you, and you'll stay together. That's what I can give you. Maybe it's not much, but it's what I have. The silence that followed was broken by Ivy. The quiet twin stepped forward, her dark eyes fixed on Stone with unnerving intensity. You lost someone, she said softly. We lost someone too. Mama. Papa before that. Stone crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. I'm sorry for your loss. Both losses. Will you lose us too? The question, so simple, so devastating, seemed to strike Stone physical as a blow. He was quiet for a long moment before answering. No, he said finally. No, Ivy. I won't lose you. Any of you. That's a promise. Ivy studied him with that eerie calm that characterized both twins. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. Just like that. Okay. Stone straightened, and Lena saw something like wonder cross his face. He cleared his throat. Right. Food. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage basics. There's bread from town, cold chicken, vegetables from the garden. Not fancy, but filling. We can help, Mary offered shyly. I'd appreciate that. They moved into the kitchen, a large, sunny room with a cast-iron stove and a table big enough for 8. Stone pulled food from the icebox while Mary and Lena set plates. Thomas found glasses. The twins arranged chairs. It was strange, this domestic choreography with a man they'd known for mere hours. Strange and oddly natural both. The meal itself was simple but plentiful. Fresh bread with butter, cold chicken, carrots and potatoes from the garden, milk from Stone's cows still cool from the spring house. To children accustomed to rationing every bite, it was a feast. Stone watched them eat with something like satisfaction. "There's plenty," he said when Lena hesitated before taking seconds. "Eat your fill." So they did. And for the first time in months, Lena felt the constant knot of hunger in her stomach begin to ease. After the meal, Stone showed them upstairs. 5 bedrooms, as promised. 4 smaller ones and a larger corner room with windows on 2 walls. "This was going to be—" Stone paused. "I had plans for this room once, but that was a long time ago. It's yours now if you want it, Lena, as the oldest." She walked to the window, looking out over the ranch. The sun was lowering toward the western mountains, painting everything gold. It was beautiful, almost painfully so. "The younger ones can choose their rooms," Stone continued, "or share if they prefer. Whatever makes them comfortable." Mary appeared at Lena's elbow. "Can I stay with you? At least at first?" Lena squeezed her sister's hand. "Of course." The twins chose to share, as expected. Thomas took the room next to Lena's, close enough to help if needed, far enough for independence. Stone provided linens, showed them where things were kept, then retreated downstairs to give them space. "What do you think?" Thomas asked Lena later when the younger ones were exploring their new rooms. "I think it's too good to be true," Lena answered honestly. "I think there has to be a catch somewhere. But maybe—" She looked at her brother, seeing shadows under his eyes that no 9-year-old should carry. "Maybe we're due for some good. Maybe the universe decided we'd suffered enough." Thomas nodded slowly. He seemed sad. Stone, under all the quiet. "He is sad. He lost his brother. Like we lost Mama and Papa." "Yes." "Then maybe," Thomas said thoughtfully, "maybe we can help each other. Us and him." The simplicity of childhood wisdom. Lena pulled her brother into a hug, and he let her, still young enough for comfort, old enough to understand its value. Night fell soft and warm. They gathered in Lena's room, all 5 of them, unable quite yet to separate even with individual spaces available. Stone appeared at the door, a lantern in hand. "Thought you might want light," he said. "Gets dark up here once sun's down." "Thank you," Lena said. He nodded, starting to turn away, then paused. "I know today's been a lot. Big changes, new place, stranger taking you in. If you need anything, water, extra blankets, just someone to check there's nothing hiding under the bed. I'll be downstairs. Don't hesitate." "Stone?" Ivy's voice soft in the dimness. "Yes? Do you have nightmares?" The question hung in the air. Stone's expression shifted, something raw and honest. "Sometimes, about my brother, about not getting there in time." "We have nightmares too," Ivy said. "About Mama, about the fever, about being separated." "That's understandable. Will they go away, the nightmares?" Stone considered this carefully. "I don't know. Mine haven't, but they get easier, less sharp. Time doesn't heal everything, but it does soften edges." "Okay." Ivy seemed satisfied with this honesty. Stone bid them good night and left, his footsteps fading down the stairs. The children sat together in the gathering dark, processing the day's impossibilities. "I like him," Mary announced suddenly. "He's sad, but he's kind. You can tell." "How can you tell?" Thomas challenged. "The way he looks at us. Like we matter. Like we're people, not problems." James, the quieter twin, spoke for the first time since morning. "He kept his word. Said we'd stay together. We did." "One day doesn't mean always," Lena cautioned, though something in her chest wanted to believe. But when exhaustion finally claimed them and they settled into makeshift sleeping arrangements on the floor of Lena's room, none quite ready to sleep alone, it was with full stomachs and clean clothes and the luxury of safety. Outside, the Wyoming night sang its cricket and coyote song. Inside, 5 orphaned children slept in a stranger's house, together as they demanded. protected as they'd been promised. And downstairs, Caleb Stone sat in the dark main room, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. 5 children. 5 lives now dependent on him keeping the promise he'd made to a brother 15 years dead. He thought about the way Lena had challenged him, protecting her siblings with nothing but words and will, about Mary's shy smile when the dog wagged his tail, about the twins' eerie calm and Thomas's careful questions, about how Ivy had seen straight through to his grief and recognized it as matching her own. They were broken, these children, damaged by loss and system and circumstance. But then, so was he. Maybe Thomas had it right. Maybe they could help each other. Stone lifted the glass, took a slow sip, and listened to the old house settle around its new occupants. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, explanations to Jack, supplies to purchase, routines to establish, a household to run with 5 children instead of solitary silence. Tomorrow would be complicated. But tonight, 5 children who'd stood on an auction block in the brutal summer heat slept safe and together under his roof. Tonight, for the first time in 15 years, the failure that had haunted every breath felt fractionally lighter. Tonight was enough. Outside, stars blazed brilliant across the vast Wyoming sky, and the land stretched endless in all directions, hard and beautiful and unforgiving. But within the White House, nestled against Pine Hills, something new had taken root. Fragile as hope, uncertain as tomorrow, but real nonetheless. A family. Not born, but chosen. Not perfect, but present. And that, for now, was everything. The first full day at the Stone Ranch began with birdsong and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. Lena woke disoriented, her body still expecting the cramped boarding house room they'd occupied before the auction. Then memory returned. The platform, the heat. Stone's quiet voice saying he'd take them all. Beside her, Mary still slept, one hand curled beneath her cheek. Across the room, the makeshift bedding they'd arranged showed evidence of restless sleep. Thomas was already awake, sitting by the window and watching the sun paint the eastern hills gold. "You sleep at all?" Lena asked softly. "Some." He didn't turn from the window. "Kept thinking I'd wake up back in Bitter Creek, that yesterday was just a dream." "I know the feeling." A knock at the door preceded Stone's voice. "Morning. Breakfast in 20 minutes if you're hungry. No rush, though." His footsteps retreated before Lena could respond. She roused the others gently, and they dressed in yesterday's clothes, the only clothes they owned. The reality of their situation settled fresh. They had nothing, were nothing in the eyes of most folks. Just unwanted children someone had purchased out of pity or guilt, or whatever motivated a lonely rancher to upend his quiet life. Downstairs, the kitchen was warm and smelled like bacon and fresh bread. Stone stood at the stove, his back to them as he worked. The dog, Bear, lay near the door, thumping his tail in greeting but not moving from his post. "Coffee's ready, if any of you drink it," Stone said without turning. "Milk's on the table. Breakfast'll be done shortly." They settled at the table in uncertain silence. Stone served plates loaded with eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, toast thick with butter. More food than they'd seen in months, presented without ceremony or expectation of gratitude. "Eat," he said simply, then took his own seat. For several minutes, only the sounds of eating filled the kitchen. Then Mary, emboldened by a full stomach, broke the quiet. "What do we call you?" Stone looked up from his plate. "What do you mean?" "Some folks would want sir, or master, or—" She trailed off, uncertain. Something dark crossed Stone's expression. "I'm not your master. You're not servants. Stone works fine. Or Caleb, if you're more comfortable with that." "Caleb," Ivy repeated, testing the name. "Like the Bible." "My mother had religious leanings." A hint of dry humor touched his voice. "Didn't take with me much, but the name stuck." The back door opened and Jack Morrison entered, pausing when he saw the full table. His weathered face registered surprise again, as though he'd half expected yesterday to be imagination. "Morning, boss. Didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not. Jack, proper introductions. This is Lena, Thomas, Mary, and the twins, Ivy and James." Stone gestured to each child in turn. Children, this is Jack Morrison. He's been 15 years, knows this ranch better than I do. Jack removed his hat, holding it awkward in calloused hands. Pleased to meet you all proper-like. Welcome to the ranch. Thank you, Lena said, because someone had to. Jack, I'll need to head into town today, Stone continued. The children need clothes, supplies, basics. Can you manage things here? Course. Though, Jack hesitated. Might want to brace yourself. Word's probably spread by now about yesterday. Let it spread. I don't answer to gossip. No, sir, you don't. But 5 children appearing overnight, folks will have questions. Folks can mind their own business. Stone's tone allowed no argument. He turned to the children. After breakfast, we'll head to town. Get you outfitted proper. Won't be fancy, but it'll be yours. Lena's throat tightened. New clothes, things that belonged to them, chosen for them. It seemed impossible. The ride to town was quieter than yesterday's journey. Stone drove the wagon with the same steady competence. But Lena noticed tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Preparing for battle, she realized. Against judgment, questions. The weight of public opinion he claimed not to care about, but clearly braced for nonetheless. Bitter Creek looked different in morning light. Less threatening, more ordinary. Just a dusty Wyoming town trying to survive on ranching and railroad money. But when Stone's wagon rolled down Main Street, heads turned. Conversations stopped. Women whispered behind hands while men stared open and calculating. Stone ignored it all, pulling up in front of the general store with mechanical precision. Come on, he said, helping the children down. Let's get this done. The store's interior was dim after the bright sunshine, crowded with goods stacked floor to ceiling. The proprietor, a thin man with suspicious eyes, looked up from his ledger and his expression shifted from welcoming to wary in an instant. Mr. Stone, heard you'd acquired some children. News travels. Stone's voice was flat. They need clothes, shoes, basics. That'll run considerable. I'm good for it. You know I am. The proprietor's gaze swept over the children, assessing and dismissive both. Suppose I do. What sizes? What followed was an education in humiliation. The man measured them like livestock, his hands impersonal and rough. Made comments about their thinness, their condition, the expense of outfitting 5 children all at once. Stone's jaw grew progressively tighter, but he said nothing, just pointed to practical items and nodded when the proprietor quoted prices. Dresses for the girls, simple cotton, sturdy. Trousers and shirts for the boys, undergarments, nightclothes, shoes that actually fit. Hairbrushes, soap, tooth powder. The pile grew, and with it the proprietor's poorly concealed resentment. Running a charity now, are you? A voice called from near the door. Lena turned to see a woman in expensive dress watching with cold eyes. Taking in strays? Taking in children, Stone corrected, not looking at her. There's a difference. Is there? They were auctioned for a reason. Surplus stock, no prospects. They're children, Mrs. Hartford, not stock. Steel had entered Stone's voice. And I'd appreciate you treating them as such in my presence. Mrs. Hartford's face flushed. Well, I suppose a man living alone all these years might get peculiar ideas about what constitutes family. The implication hung ugly in the air. Lena saw Thomas stiffen, saw Mary's eyes go wide with confused hurt, saw the twins exchange one of their wordless communications. Stone set down the boots he'd been examining with careful, controlled precision. When he turned to face Mrs. Hartford, his expression was carved granite. Ma'am, I'll say this once and only once. Those children are under my protection and in my care. Anyone, and I mean anyone, who suggests impropriety or spreads poison about their situation will answer to me personal. Are we clear? The store had gone silent. Mrs. Hartford's flush deepened, but she lifted her chin. Threatening respectable citizens now. How far you've fallen, Caleb Stone. I haven't fallen anywhere. But you're about to fall out of the store if you don't leave. Now. Mrs. Hartford drew herself up, gathered her skirts, and swept toward the door. She paused on the threshold. This town will talk. You can't stop that. No, Stone agreed, but I can choose not to listen. Good day, Mrs. Hartford. When the door slammed behind her, The silence persisted another beat before the proprietor cleared his throat. She's not wrong about the talk, Stone. People will wonder. Let them wonder. Stone pulled out his wallet. Total it up. The transaction completed in tight-lipped silence. Stone paid without flinching at the sum, then helped load packages into the wagon. The children followed, subdued by the encounter, by the reality that their presence had made Stone a target for judgment and speculation. Back at the wagon, Stone paused before climbing up. He crouched down to the children's level, his expression softer than Lena had yet seen it. Listen to me, all of you. What that woman said, what anyone says, doesn't matter. You're not strays, you're not charity cases. You're children who deserved better than being sold on a platform, and I'm a man with the means to provide it. That's the whole story. Everything else is just noise. But she said, Mary started. I know what she said, and she's wrong. People fear what they don't understand, and they understand even less than they fear. He straightened. You'll hear worse before this is done, but you'll hear it from a position of safety, with full bellies and clothes that fit, and that counts for something. The ride home was quiet, but a different quality of quiet, thoughtful instead of fearful. When they arrived back at the ranch, Jack helped unload packages while Stone started preparing lunch. That afternoon, Lena explored the house proper for the first time. It was larger than she'd initially realized. Besides the 5 bedrooms upstairs, there was a study lined with books, a sitting room with comfortable furniture, a dining room they hadn't yet used. Everything clean and well-maintained, but somehow empty, like a stage set waiting for actors. She found Stone in the study, standing before a shelf of books with his back to the door. He didn't turn when she entered, but his voice indicated he'd known she was there. You can read any of these. They're just gathering dust otherwise. Lena moved closer, scanning titles. Literature, history, agriculture, astronomy, an eclectic collection. You've read them all? Most. Winter gets long up here. Books help pass time. Must get lonely. Sometimes. He pulled a volume from the shelf, ran his fingers over the worn cover. But lonely's familiar. I know how to live with it. And now? Now I'm figuring out how to live with the opposite. He replaced the book carefully. I wasn't lying yesterday, Lena. I'm not good at this. At people. At family. I've lived alone for 15 years. I'm set in my ways, rough around the edges. I'll make mistakes. We'll all make mistakes, Lena said quietly. We don't know how to live here either. Don't know what you expect, what rules we're supposed to follow. Stone turned finally, meeting her eyes. Then we'll figure it out together. As for rules, respect the house, respect each other, no lying. Beyond that, we'll make it up as we go. That's simple? That's simple. He paused. Though I should mention, Sundays, Jack usually takes the day off. I don't attend church, never have. But if you children want to go, I'll arrange it. Lena thought about the woman in the store, about cold eyes and colder judgment. I don't think we'd be particularly welcome. No, Stone agreed. Probably not. Not at first, anyway. They stood in companionable silence, surrounded by books and dust motes dancing in afternoon light. Finally, Stone spoke again. I need to check the north pasture before dinner. You're welcome to come if you'd like. See more of the ranch. It wasn't an order. Wasn't even really a request, just an offer, extended without expectation. Lena found herself nodding before fully considering. I'll tell the others. In the end, all 5 children piled into the wagon for the tour. Stone drove them across his land, pointing out landmarks and explaining operations. Here was where the creek ran deepest, good for swimming in summer. There was the line shack where hands stayed during cattle drives. Those hills marked the western boundary, 3,000 acres, just like he'd said. Thomas asked questions about the cattle, about seasons and breeding and market prices. Stone answered with patience, clearly pleased by the boy's genuine interest. Mary collected wildflowers from the roadside, weaving them into a chain. The twins remained quiet but watchful, absorbing everything. You run this all yourself? Lena asked when they paused at a high point overlooking the valley. Me and Jack, and whatever hands we hire seasonal. It's manageable. Stone gestured toward the distant mountains. My brother and I used to talk about building something like this. He had ideas, guest ranch maybe, where city folks could come experience the West proper. He was always thinking bigger than I was. What was his name? Ivy asked. Samuel. Sam, mostly. Stone's voice went soft. He was smart, funny, saw good in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. Like you took us, James observed. Stone looked at the quiet twin with something like surprise. Maybe, though I'd say you deserved considerably more than you were getting. They returned to the ranch as shadows lengthened, the wagon bed full of children and wildflowers and the beginning of something that might eventually become familiarity. Jack had dinner started, beans and cornbread, simple but filling. They ate together at the kitchen table, conversation flowing easier than it had that morning. After dinner, Stone showed them the barn. Introduced them to the horses, let them see where Bear slept on cold nights. He moved through these spaces with easy confidence, clearly in his element. This was his world, land and animals and honest work. Children were new territory, but he was trying. They could all see that. That night, when the younger ones had settled into their chosen rooms, Thomas appeared at Lena's door. Can I ask you something? Always. He came in, closing the door behind him. In the lamplight, he looked older than 9, burdened by responsibility he shouldn't have to carry yet. Do you trust him, Stone? Lena considered carefully. I don't know him well enough to trust completely, but I think he's honest, and I think he means what he says about keeping us together. That woman today, Mrs. Hartford, she implied, I know what she implied, she was wrong, how do you know? Because I've seen men with bad intentions, Thomas. They don't look like Stone, they don't act like him, they take, they demand, they expect gratitude and obedience. Lena met her brother's worried eyes. Stone expects nothing. He's giving us space to adjust, to settle. That's not the behavior of someone with ulterior motives. Thomas absorbed this. Jack seems good too. He does. And the ranch it's nice here. Nicer than anywhere we've been. Yes. So maybe we got lucky. Thomas said it like he was trying to convince himself. Maybe after everything bad, we finally got lucky. Lena pulled her brother into a hug. Maybe we did. But she lay awake long after Thomas returned to his room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling, wondering how long luck lasted and what price it ultimately demanded. Downstairs, Stone sat in the darkened study, a glass of whiskey forgotten on the desk beside him. Today had been harder than he'd anticipated, the stares, the whispers, Mrs. Hartford's ugly implications. He'd expected judgment, but expecting and experiencing proved different animals. The children had handled it with more grace than he had. Lena especially, standing straight-backed and dignified while being measured like livestock. Thomas asking intelligent questions despite obvious discomfort. Mary gathering flowers as though beauty could be found anywhere if you looked close enough. The twins absorbing everything with that unnerving calm. They were remarkable, these children, stronger than they knew, but strength had limits, and the world was cruel to those it considered expendable. Stone thought about Samuel, about how his brother would have loved these children, would have known instinctively how to talk to them, how to make them laugh, how to ease their fears. Samuel had possessed natural warmth that Caleb had always lacked. People had gravitated to Sam, trusted him immediately. Caleb inspired wariness at best, suspicion more commonly. But he was what these children had. Rough, taciturn, emotionally stunted, but committed. He'd made a promise on that auction platform, and Caleb Stone kept his promises. It was perhaps the only thing he did reliably well. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The children needed routine, structure, purpose. He'd have to figure out schooling. The nearest school was in town, which presented obvious problems. Maybe a tutor. Though finding someone willing to come to the ranch of the man who'd scandalized Bitter Creek by purchasing 5 orphans would prove interesting. One problem at a time. Tonight they were fed and safe. Tomorrow could handle itself. Stone finished his whiskey in one long swallow, extinguished the lamp, and headed upstairs. He paused outside Lena's room, heard quiet breathing, sleep, finally. Moved on to Thomas's door. More soft breathing. Mary's room. The twins shared space. All accounted for. All safe. He lay in his own bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the house breathe around him with new life. and wondered if Samuel was watching somehow. Wondered if his brother would approve of this mad decision, this sudden family. He thought Samuel would. Sam had always believed in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that broken things could be made whole. Well, they were all broken here. Maybe that was exactly what they needed, to piece each other back together, shard by careful shard, until something new emerged. Morning came soft and golden. The second full day at the Stone Ranch began with the children waking earlier, adjusting to the rhythms of the house. Lena found Stone already in the kitchen, coffee made, bacon sizzling. "Morning," he said. "Sleep better?" "Some." She moved to help without being asked, pulling plates from the cupboard. "What's the plan today?" "Thought we'd work on settling you in proper. Set up your rooms how you like them. There's furniture in the attic, beds, dressers, things my parents left. We can bring down whatever you need." He flipped bacon with practiced efficiency. "Also need to figure out schooling. You're all bright, shouldn't go without education." "The school in town won't want us," Lena said flatly. "No, but there are other options. I'll look into it." The others filtered in gradually, drawn by food smells and the promise of a new day. They ate together, conversation flowing easier each time. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. After breakfast, Stone led them to the attic, a vast space under the eaves, dusty and crowded with the accumulated belongings of generations. Furniture, trunks, boxes of books and papers. The detritus of lives lived and finished. "My parents built this house 40 years ago," Stone explained, holding a lantern high, "raised me and Sam here. After they died, I kept everything, couldn't bring myself to sort through it. But it's just gathering dust now, might as well put it to use." The children spread out, exploring. Mary found a trunk of linens, quilts hand-stitched in intricate patterns, curtains embroidered with flowers. Thomas discovered a bookshelf that would fit perfect in his room. The twins unearthed a rocking horse, weathered but sturdy. Lena found herself drawn to a dresser in the corner. Simple construction but beautiful proportions, the wood grain rich even under years of dust. She ran her fingers over it, imagining it cleaned and polished, holding the new clothes folded in packages downstairs. "That was my mother's," Stone said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. "She'd have liked you using it." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. All of this," he gestured at the crowded space, "it's meant to be used. Meant for family. That's you now." The word settled something in Lena's chest. Family. They'd been a family before, her and the siblings, but always precarious, always one disaster from dissolution. This felt different, intentional, chosen. They spent the day hauling furniture downstairs, cleaning decades of dust, arranging rooms to the children's preferences. Stone worked alongside them, patient when things didn't fit, creative in finding solutions. Jack helped with the heavy lifting, his initial wariness of the children fading into gruff affection. By evening, the house had transformed. No longer a bachelor's sparse dwelling, it hummed with the organized chaos of children making spaces their own. Mary's room gained curtains embroidered with roses. Thomas's bookshelf filled with volumes from the study. The twins' rocking horse found pride of place between their beds. And Lena's room held her mother's dresser, polished to gleaming, topped with a small mirror and the hairbrush from town. Her new dresses hung in the wardrobe. The bed wore a quilt in shades of blue and cream. It was hers. Actually, truly hers. She found Stone in the hallway, watching the organized chaos with an expression caught between bewilderment and something softer. "Thank you," Lena said. "For what?" "For this. All of it. The furniture, the rooms, She gestured helplessly. "Everything." Stone was quiet a moment. Then, "My mother used to say a house isn't a home until it holds the people you love. This place has been a house for 15 years. Maybe now it can be something more." "Do you love us?" The question escaped before Lena could stop it, too bold, too much. But Stone didn't flinch. "I don't know you well enough yet to love you. But I'm committed to you, which might matter more. Love's a feeling, comes and goes like weather. Commitment's a choice you make every day." His gray eyes met hers steadily. "I'm choosing you. All 5 of you. Every day." It was perhaps the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. Lena nodded, throat too tight for words. That night, for the first time, one roof, but with space to breathe, to be individuals as well as siblings. Lena lay in the darkness, surrounded by things that belonged to her, and felt the knot of constant vigilance begin, just barely, to loosen. Downstairs, Caleb Stone sat at his desk and wrote a letter to a teacher he'd known years ago, now retired but still sharp. Explained the situation, asked if she'd be willing to tutor 5 bright children who needed education but couldn't attend town school. Didn't mention the auction, the gossip, the judgment, just wrote, "I have 5 children who deserve better than they've gotten. Can you help?" He sealed the letter, set it aside for tomorrow's mail run, and allowed himself a moment of cautious hope. They were 2 days in, just 2 days. But the house felt different already, lived in, purposeful. The silence he'd grown accustomed to had been replaced by voices, footsteps, life. It scared him, this sudden responsibility. But it also felt right in a way nothing had since Samuel died. Maybe Thomas was right. Maybe after everything bad, they'd all finally gotten lucky. Time would tell. Time always did. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost dangerously normal. The children woke to the smell of coffee and breakfast, spent mornings helping with light chores, afternoons exploring the ranch under Jack's watchful eye. Stone's letter had gone unanswered so far, but he'd purchased primers and readers from town, and Lena had taken to teaching the younger ones in the afternoons, her own education just sufficient to pass along. The ranch itself became their classroom. Thomas learned mathematics through calculating feed ratios and fence measurements. Mary studied botany in the garden, her careful hands coaxing vegetables from the Wyoming soil. Even the twins, so often silent, opened up when working with the horses, their gentle persistence earning trust from animals that shied from everyone else. Stone watched it all with quiet satisfaction, speaking little but present always, a steady shadow ensuring their safety without demanding gratitude or affection in return. He was teaching them, too, though he'd never call it that. How to read weather in the way clouds gathered over mountains. How to gentle a spooked horse with patience instead of force. How to fix things broken instead of discarding them. But peace, Lena was learning, was fragile as morning frost. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, announced by dust rising on the eastern road. Stone saw it from the barn and went still, his expression hardening into something dangerous. Jack appeared at his shoulder, following his gaze. "That's Hutchins' wagon," Jack said quietly. "I know." "What's he want?" "Nothing good." Stone's jaw tightened. "Get the children inside. Keep them there until I say otherwise." Lena, working in the garden with Mary, saw Jack striding toward them with purpose. "Inchi, both of you, now. Find Thomas and the twins. Stay in the house." "What's wrong?" Mary's voice went small with fear. That old familiar fear that safety was temporary, that bad things always found you eventually. "Don't know yet, but Stone said inside, so inside we go." Jack's tone brooked no argument. "Move." They gathered in the kitchen, all 5 children pressed against the windows to watch. The wagon rolled up the drive, Jacob Hutchins driving, and beside him a man in a dark suit that looked wrong against the dust and prairie grass. A third figure sat in the back, harder to make out. Stone met them in the yard, Bear at his heels growling low. The dog's hackles were raised, sensing his master's tension. "Hutchins," Stone said flatly, "didn't expect to see you on my land." "Mr. Stone," Hutchins climbed down, all false friendliness. "This here is Mr. Albert Grayson from the Territorial Child Welfare Board. He's come to discuss your recent acquisition." The suited man descended with practiced dignity, pulling papers from a leather case. "Mr. Stone, I'm here to investigate reports that you've taken custody of 5 minor children under questionable circumstances." "Nothing questionable about it. Public auction, legal transaction, all documented." Stone's voice remained level, but Lena heard steel underneath. "Be that as it may, the board has concerns. A single man, no wife, suddenly acquiring 5 children. I see." Stone's tone dropped to something colder than Lena had yet heard. "And who exactly raised these concerns? Mrs. Hartford, perhaps? Or you, Hutchins, still bitter I wouldn't sell you 2 boys to work yourself to death in your freight business?" Hutchins colored. "Now see here." No, you see here. Those children were being auctioned like livestock. Split up, sold separate to whoever bid highest. I paid fair price to keep them together, gave them a home, food, safety. If the territorial board has issue with that, they can take it up with a judge. Grayson's expression remained professionally neutral. Mr. Stone, I'm not questioning your intentions, but regulations exist for children's protection. I'll need to inspect the premises, interview the children separately, assess their living conditions. You'll do no such thing. Stone stepped forward, and though he didn't touch the man, Grayson retreated half a step. You want to assess conditions? Fine. Look around from right here. See that house? Clean, well-maintained, plenty of room. That barn? Full of livestock, evidence of a working, profitable ranch. Those gardens? The children help tend them, learning useful skills. They sleep in real beds, eat 3 meals daily, have clothes that fit and books to read. They're safe, together, and cared for. That's all the assessment you need. The law required they be auctioned in the first place. Stone's voice cut like a blade. The law allowed men to bid on children like they were buying horses. So forgive me if I don't put much stock in what the law requires when it comes to their welfare. Movement from the wagon's bed caught Lena's attention. The third figure climbed down, and her blood went ice cold. Martin Crow. The man who'd run the boarding house where they'd stayed before the auction, who'd provided minimal food and maximum criticism, who'd looked at Lena with eyes that made her skin crawl and had grabbed Thomas hard enough to leave bruises when the boy talked back. That's him, Mary whispered, pressing against Lena's side. That's Mr. Crow. Thomas had gone rigid, his hands clenched white-knuckled. The twins stood silent and still, but Lena saw Ivy's hand drift toward her pocket, where she'd taken to carrying a small knife Stone had given her for peeling vegetables. Mr. Crow here has volunteered information, Grayson was saying. He's served as temporary guardian to these children before the auction. He's expressed concerns about their placement. Concerns? Stone's laugh was bitter as alkali water. What concerns would those be, Crow? That they're no longer available for you to work without pay? That you can't skim their rations anymore? Crow stepped forward, all wounded dignity. I provided for those children as best I could with limited resources. But a man like you, Mr. Stone, living alone, no family, taking in 5 children sudden-like, it raises questions about motives, improper motives, if you understand my meaning. The implication hung ugly in the summer air. Lena felt rage kindle in her chest, but Stone spoke before she could. Say that again. Say that. His voice had gone quiet, deadly. Say that again, so I'm sure I heard you correct. Crow faltered, but Hutchins spoke up. The man's just expressing legitimate concerns. There's nothing legitimate about what he's implying. Nothing. Stone's control was cracking, fury bleeding through. I took these children in because the alternative was watching them be split apart and sold to the lowest bidder. Because I have the means and the space, and maybe a shred of human decency left in me. If you or anyone else wants to twist that into something ugly, you'll answer for it. Threatening citizens now? Grayson's tone sharpened. Mr. Stone, you're not helping your case. I'm not the one who needs help with my case. You want to assess the children? Fine. But you do it with me present, in my house, with them knowing they don't have to answer anything that makes them uncomfortable. And Crow? Stone turned his full attention to the boarding house keeper. You set foot on my property again, uninvited, and we'll have problems of a very direct nature. Inside the house, Lena made a decision. She straightened, squeezed Mary's hand, and headed for the door. Lena, no! Thomas grabbed for her, but she was already moving. She stepped onto the porch, and 4 pairs of footsteps followed. The children emerged together, standing in a line that would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. 5 children facing down 3 grown men and the weight of institutional authority. Stone turned, surprise and something like alarm crossing his face. Get back inside. No. Lena's voice carried clear across the yard. They want to assess us? Let them. We'll tell them exactly what our living conditions are like. Grayson studied them with professional interest. Young lady, I'd prefer to conduct interviews privately. I'm sure you would, but we don't know you, don't trust you. And after what happened last time, adults decided our futures without our input. You'll forgive us for wanting to speak our piece together." "Lena," Stone said, warning in his tone. But Thomas stepped forward, standing beside his sister. "She's right. They're making decisions about us. We should get a say." Mary followed, then the twins, silent, united. 5 children who'd learned the hard way that adults rarely had their best interests at heart. Grayson glanced at Stone, who looked torn between pride and frustration. Finally, Stone nodded once, sharply. "All right then," Grayson said. "Tell me about your living conditions here." Lena lifted her chin. "We each have our own room with a real bed, clean linens, furniture. We eat 3 meals a day, actual meals, not watered-down gruel and stale bread. We have clothes that fit, shoes without holes. Mr. Stone doesn't hit us, doesn't scream at us, doesn't work us until we collapse." "Comparing me to someone specific, girl?" Crow's voice dripped false concern. "You know exactly what I'm comparing you to." Lena turned her full attention to the boarding house keeper, and years of suppressed anger poured into her voice. "You fed us the minimum to keep us alive and pocketed the rest of the county's provision money. You made Thomas sleep in the shed when he talked back. You told Mary she was worthless and stupid every single day for 6 months, and you—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. The way Crow had looked at her, the comments he'd made, the locked door she'd learned to barricade from inside. Stone had gone very still, his eyes fixed on Crow with an intensity that made the air feel charged. "And he what, Lena?" "Nothing happened," she said quickly. "I made sure of it, but he tried. He wanted to." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Stone moved, crossing the distance to Crow in 3 long strides. The boarding house keeper stumbled back, hands raised defensive, but Stone grabbed his shirt front and hauled him close. "You touched her?" Stone's voice was barely above a whisper, more terrifying than any shout. "I never— She's lying," Crow stammered. "Mr. Stone, release him immediately." Grayson started forward, but Jack intercepted, his weathered face hard. "Best let this play out," Jack said quietly. Stone shook Crow once, hard. "Did you touch her?" "Stone!" Lena called. "He didn't. I didn't let him. I'm telling you so you know what we came from, what we escaped. So you understand why we'd rather stay here with you than go anywhere that man suggests." Slowly, with visible effort, Stone released Crow. The boarding house keeper stumbled backward, nearly falling. Stone turned to Grayson, his expression carved granite. "You wanted assessment? There's your assessment. These children came from a place where they were starved, abused, and worse. They've been here 2 weeks and already they're healthier, safer, better cared for than any time in the system your board supposedly oversees. So you tell me, Mr. Grayson, where exactly do you think their best interests lie?" Grayson looked at the children, really looked at them. Saw Mary's good color, Thomas's straight shoulders, the twins' calm certainty. Saw Lena standing protective in front of her siblings, fierce as any mother bear. "I'll need to see the house," he said finally. "Fine." Stone gestured toward the porch. "Children, show Mr. Grayson whatever he wants to see." What followed was the strangest tour Lena had ever given. They led Grayson through the house, showing him their rooms, the kitchen, the study filled with books. Mary demonstrated the lessons Lena had been teaching. Thomas showed his figures, calculations for feed costs and lumber measurements. The twins led him to the barn, showed him the horses they'd been learning to gentle. Through it all, Grayson took notes, his expression unreadable. Hutchins and Crow remained in the yard with Stone and Jack, a standoff maintained by mutual wariness. Finally, back on the porch, Grayson closed his notebook. "I've seen enough. And," Stone's voice was tight, "and the children appear well cared for. The accommodations are more than adequate. Their education is being addressed." He paused. "However, the irregularity of the situation remains concerning. A formal hearing will be scheduled. You'll need to appear before a judge, present your case for maintaining custody." "When?" 2 weeks. I'll send notice." Grayson descended the porch steps, then paused. "Mr. Stone, I'll be honest. This situation is unprecedented. The board doesn't know what to make of it, but those children clearly don't want to leave. That counts for something." "Counts for everything," Stone corrected. Grayson nodded slowly, then turned to his wagon. Hutchins followed, casting resentful looks back. Crow moved to climb aboard, but Stone's voice stopped him. Crow, you come near these children again. You so much as look at them cross, and I'll finish what I started today. Board, law, consequences be damned. We clear? Crow's face was pale, but he managed a nod before scrambling into the wagon. They watched the dust settle in the wagon's wake, 5 children and 2 men standing in the late afternoon sun. Then Stone turned, and Lena saw exhaustion in every line of his face. Inside, he said quietly. All of you. We need to talk. They gathered in the kitchen, the table that had been the site of so many peaceful meals now feeling like a war room. Stone paced, working through thoughts, while Jack leaned against the counter with crossed arms. A hearing, Thomas said. What does that mean? Means a judge will decide if you stay or go, Jack answered when Stone remained silent. But we want to stay, Mary protested. We said that, isn't that enough? Not always. Stone stopped pacing, braced his hands on the table. The law's funny about children. Thinks it knows better than they do what's best for them. So what do we do? Lena asked. We prepare. We document everything. Your condition when you arrived, your condition now. We get statements from anyone willing to say you're better off here. We make a case so airtight no judge could rule against it. And if they do anyway? Lena's voice was small. Rule against it, I mean? The silence stretched. Stone met her eyes, and she saw the answer there before he spoke it. Then I'll fight, every way I know how, but I won't lie to you. Judges have power I don't. If they decide to remove you, my options become limited. You mean we could be sent back, to Crow or someone like him? Thomas spoke flatly, stating fact. Over my dead body, Stone said with quiet intensity. But yes, that's the risk. Ivy, silent until now, spoke softly. Why do they hate us so much? The question was heartbreaking in its simplicity. Stone crossed to her, crouched down to her level. They don't hate you. They fear what they don't understand, and they hide that fear behind rules and procedures and respectability. A man like me, rough, alone, buying children at auction, doesn't fit their idea of how the world should work, so they try to make it fit by taking you away. That's stupid, Ivy stated. Despite everything, Stone smiled. Yes, it is. So we prove them wrong, Lena said, strength returning to her voice. We show them this isn't some improper situation. We show them we're a family. Are we? James asked, looking between them all. A family? The question hung in the air. Stone straightened slowly, his gaze sweeping across all 5 children. These strangers who'd become his responsibility, his purpose. Something perilously close to his world in just 2 weeks. Yes, he said finally. Maybe not traditional, maybe not what anyone expected. But yes, we're a family. Mary crossed to him suddenly, wrapped her arms around his waist. He froze, clearly unpracticed at physical affection, but then his hand settled gentle on her head. Then we fight, she said, voice muffled against his shirt. Then we fight, Stone agreed. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Stone hired a lawyer from the territorial capital, a sharp woman named Catherine Walsh, who'd made a career of fighting for unpopular causes. She arrived 3 days after Grayson's visit, took one look at the children, and declared the board's concerns bureaucratic nonsense masking small-town prejudice. But we'll need to prove it, she continued, setting up a makeshift office in Stone's study. Document everything. I'll need statements from the children about their previous conditions, medical examinations showing improved health, character witnesses willing to testify on Mr. Stone's behalf. The medical examination came first. Doc Morrison, no relation to Jack, but friendly with him, rode out from town. He was an older man, weathered but kind, who'd been practicing medicine in Wyoming since before statehood. He examined each child thoroughly, making notes. Malnutrition, healing now. Evidence of old bruises, healed. This boy, he gestured to Thomas, has a badly set finger, probably broken and never treated proper. The oldest girl shows signs of chronic stress, but that's improving. Will you testify? Walsh asked. Don't see why not. These children are healthier now. Character witnesses proved harder. Stone had few friends in town, and those he had were reluctant to involve themselves in controversy. But Jack stepped forward without hesitation. Known Caleb Stone for 15 years, he told Walsh during his interview. He's honest, hardworking, fair, pays good wages, treats people right. If he says he'll care for those children, he'll do it. The ranch hands who'd worked for Stone over the years sent statements. The teacher Stone had written to finally responded, offering to testify about his character and to provide formal education for the children if the court allowed it. Even Doc Morrison added a letter detailing Stone's care when Jack had been injured years back, evidence of compassion and responsibility. But the strongest testimony came from the children themselves. Walsh interviewed each one separately, building a record. Thomas spoke about the shed he'd slept in at Crow's, about meals that left him hungry, about watching Mary grow thinner each day. Mary described verbal abuse that had left scars deeper than any physical blow. The twins, in their quiet way, painted a picture of systematic neglect and casual cruelty. And Lena told the whole truth, every locked door, every uncomfortable comment, every moment she'd feared what Crow might do if she weren't vigilant. Walsh's expression grew progressively grimmer as she wrote. This is good, the lawyer said when finished. Disturbing, but good. It establishes clear contrast between before and after. Will it be enough? Stone asked. Honestly, I don't know. Judges are unpredictable, especially in cases involving children, but we're building the strongest case possible. She paused. There's one more thing that might help. If you were married, Mr. Stone, much of the impropriety argument disappears. Stone went very still. I'm not getting married just to satisfy bureaucratic concerns. I'm not suggesting you do, but I had to mention it as an option. It's not an option. His tone closed the subject. The night before the hearing, Stone couldn't sleep. He stood on the porch in the darkness, smoking a cigarette he'd bought just for this occasion despite having quit years ago. The smoke curled up into starlight, and he thought about all the ways tomorrow could destroy what they'd built. Footsteps behind him announced Lena's arrival. She joined him at the railing, her nightgown ghostly in the dimness. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. She was quiet a moment. Are you scared? Terrified. The honesty seemed to comfort her. Me too. They stood in silence, adult and child united by fear and hope and the knowledge that tomorrow would change everything one way or another. Stone, Lena said finally, if they take us away, if the judge rules against you, I want you to know something. What's that? These 2 weeks have been the best of my life. All our lives. Even if it ends tomorrow, even if we lose, you gave us something no one else could. You made us matter. Stone's throat tightened. You always mattered, Lena, always. Not to anyone else. She turned to face him. But to you. You looked at 5 unwanted children and saw people worth fighting for. That changes something inside. Makes us believe we might deserve good things after all. He wanted to tell her they'd win tomorrow, that the judge would see sense, that they'd stay together, but promises he couldn't guarantee felt like lies, and he'd never lied to her. Whatever happens, he said instead, I won't stop fighting. Courts, laws, the whole territory, I'll fight them all if I have to. Lena nodded, then surprised him by leaning against his side. He went rigid, then slowly, carefully, put his arm around her shoulders. They stood that way until the sky began to lighten in the east. A man and a girl both too damaged to trust easily, both choosing trust anyway because the alternative meant giving up. And neither of them had survived this long by giving up on things that mattered. Come dawn, they'd face judgment. But right now, in the last quiet before the storm, they were simply a father who wasn't a father and a daughter who wasn't a daughter, holding on to each other and the fragile hope that sometimes, against all odds, broken people could build something whole. The courthouse in Bitter Creek was the grandest building for 50 miles, 2 stories of stone and timber with tall windows that let in merciless light. Stone's wagon rolled up just after dawn, carrying its cargo of nervous hope and careful preparation. Catherine Walsh waited on the steps, her dark suit severe and professional, a leather case full of documents at her side. They're already inside, she said as Stone helped the children down. Grayson, Hutchins, Crow, Judge Morrison, no relation to your Jack, unfortunately, presiding. He's fair but traditional, expects decorum. We'll give him decorum, Stone said, though his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. They entered together, footsteps echoing on polished floors. The courtroom smelled like old wood and older judgments. The benches worn smooth by decades of people seeking justice or mercy or just resolution. A handful of townspeople occupied the gallery, some curious, some openly hostile. Mrs. Hartford sat in the front row, her expression suggesting she'd come to witness Stone's downfall. Judge Morrison sat behind the bench, a man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He studied the group as they entered, his gaze lingering on the children with something that might have been sympathy. "Mr. Stone," he said, his voice carrying courtroom authority. "Miss Walsh, please be seated. Children, there are chairs along the side wall. Make yourselves comfortable." The formal proceedings began with Walsh presenting their case. She spoke with precision, laying out the timeline, the auction, Stone's purchase, the establishment of the household. She presented Doc Morrison's medical report showing improved health across all 5 children, Jack's testimony about Stone's character, letters from former ranch hands and the teacher who'd agreed to provide education. "The facts are simple, Your Honor," Walsh concluded. 5 children were being auctioned, with the explicit intention of separating them. Mr. Stone prevented that separation by legal means and has provided exemplary care ever since. The board's concerns rest not on any evidence of misconduct, but on unconventional circumstances and small-town prejudice. Grayson rose to present the board's position. He was more measured than Walsh, but his argument was clear. A single man with no experience raising children, acquiring 5 at once through unusual means, represented potential risk that warranted investigation and possibly removal pending proper placement. "The board doesn't question Mr. Stone's financial means or his intentions," Grayson said carefully. "But children require more than material provision. They need proper supervision, moral guidance, a stable family structure with both maternal and paternal influence." "Your Honor," Walsh interrupted, "is the board suggesting that only traditional 2-parent households are capable of raising children? Because I have extensive precedent that says otherwise." Judge Morrison raised a hand. "Miss Walsh, you'll have opportunity to respond. Mr. Grayson, continue." Grayson presented his evidence, statements from townspeople expressing concern, Crow's account of the children's behavior before the auction, suggestions that Stone's isolation and lack of family made him unsuitable regardless of good intentions. Then Hutchins took the stand, all righteous concern. "I offered to take the boys, Your Honor, give them honest work, teach them a trade. But Stone outbid me, paid an outrageous sum, made me wonder what his real motives were." Walsh's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Hutchins, what exactly were you offering to pay per child?" $2 each for the older boys. "And what kind of work would these children, ages 10 and 9, be performing?" "General labor, loading freight, mucking stables, whatever needed doing." "For how many hours daily?" Hutchins shifted. "As needed. Freight business don't keep regular hours." "So you wanted to purchase 2 young boys for $4 total and work them as long as you deem necessary, for no wages, with no guarantee of education or proper care." "I would have fed them. That wasn't my question." Walsh's voice sharpened. "You wanted cheap labor, Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Stone wanted children to stay together as a family. Those are very different motivations." Judge Morrison made a note. Hutchins left the stand red-faced and bitter. Then Crow was called. He took his seat with performative solemnity, the picture of wounded dignity. "Mr. Crow," Grayson began, "you served as temporary guardian to these children before the auction. Can you describe their behavior during that time?" "Difficult," Crow said, shaking his head sadly. "The oldest girl was defiant, rebellious, wouldn't accept discipline. The boy Thomas talked back constantly. Even the little ones showed troubling independence. I did my best, but they were unmanageable." "And how did you attempt to manage them?" "Firm discipline, structure, the things children need to become decent citizens." Walsh rose for cross-examination, and Lena saw something predatory in her expression. "Mr. Crow, How much did the county pay you monthly to house and feed 5 children? $25. And how much of that did you actually spend on their care? That's hard to calculate exactly. Let me help you calculate. Doc Morrison's examination revealed all 5 children were malnourished when they arrived at Mr. Stone's ranch. How does one malnourish 5 children on $25 monthly unless funds are being diverted? Crow's face darkened. They were fed adequately. Where did Thomas Crowley sleep while in your care? A pause. He had a bed. Where, specifically? The boy was difficult. Sometimes he needed separation for discipline. He slept in a shed, didn't he, Mr. Crow? A 9-year-old boy, in a shed, regardless of weather, when he displeased you. That's not... Answer the question. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Crow, answer Miss Walsh's question. Crow's hands clenched. Sometimes. For discipline. And the oldest girl, Lena. Did you ever enter her room at night? The courtroom went deadly quiet. Crow's face paled. I was checking on the children. Did you ever enter her room at night after she had gone to bed and attempt to check on her in ways she found threatening? She's lying if she said that. I haven't said what she told me. I'm asking what you did. The silence stretched. Judge Morrison's expression had gone very cold. Mr. Crow, the judge said quietly, you will answer the question directly. Crow looked around the courtroom, seeing only condemnation. I never touched her. I never did anything improper. But you wanted to, Walsh said softly. Didn't you? This is outrageous. You're right. It is outrageous. Outrageous that this man was entrusted with children. Outrageous that the same system now questions whether those children are better off with someone who actually cares for their welfare. Walsh dismissed him with clear contempt. Crow practically fled the stand and whispers rippled through the gallery. Mrs. Hartford's expression had shifted from satisfaction to uncertainty. Your Honor, Walsh said, I'd like to call the children to testify. Judge Morrison hesitated. Miss Walsh, I generally prefer not to subject children to courtroom testimony. With respect, Your Honor, these children's futures are being decided. They deserve to be heard. The judge considered, then nodded slowly. Very well. But I'll keep it brief, and anyone who makes them uncomfortable will be removed from my courtroom. Lena went first, her legs shaking as she took the stand. Walsh's questions were gentle, methodical. Describe your life at Crow's. Describe your life at Stone's ranch. What do you want? Lena answered honestly, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. She detailed the hunger, the fear, the constant vigilance required to keep her siblings safe, then described the past weeks, full meals, clean rooms, the luxury of feeling secure enough to sleep through the night. What do I want? She repeated Walsh's final question. I want to stay with Stone. He's kept every promise he made. He treats us like we matter, like we're people instead of problems. He's teaching Thomas ranching, helping Mary with her garden, giving the twins space to just be children. He's given us something we never had before, a home, an actual home. Thank you, Lena. Walsh's voice was soft. No further questions. Grayson's cross-examination was brief. Miss Crowley, Mr. Stone is a single man with no experience raising children. Don't you think you'd be better off with a traditional family, a mother and father both? Lena met his eyes directly. I think I'd be better off with someone who chose us, who fights for us, who sees us as family instead of obligation. Stone is that person. Gender and marital status don't change that. Thomas testified next, his young voice clear despite obvious nerves. He spoke about the shed, about watching Mary grow thinner, about the fear that they'd be separated. Then about Stone teaching him to read account books, to calculate grazing rotations, to understand how a ranch worked. He talks to me like I'm smart enough to learn, Thomas said, like my questions matter. Nobody else ever did that. Mary's testimony was shorter. She was only 7, and Judge Morrison was gentle with her, but her words carried weight. Mr. Stone lets me plant flowers even though they're not useful like vegetables, she said. He says beauty matters too. And he never yells at me when I don't understand something. He just explains it different until I do. The twins went together, as they did everything. Ivy spoke for both of them, her calm voice somehow more impactful than tears would have been. "We were separated once," she said, "for 3 days when we first went to Mr. Crow's. They put James with the boys, me with the girls. We both stopped eating, stopped talking. They put us back together because we were too much trouble apart." She paused. Mr. Stone understood that without being told. He kept us together from the start. He understands things without needing them explained. "What things?" Walsh asked gently. "That we're different, that we need each other, that some things matter more than rules." Ivy's dark eyes found Stone across the courtroom. He lost someone once, someone he loved. He knows what it feels like when people get taken away, so he won't let it happen to us. The simplicity of it, the raw honesty, seemed to affect everyone in the courtroom. Even Grayson looked uncomfortable. Judge Morrison called a brief recess. The children clustered around Stone in the hallway, seeking reassurance he couldn't quite give. Walsh reviewed her notes with fierce concentration. "How are we doing?" Stone asked quietly. "Better than I hoped." The children's testimony was powerful, and Walsh's cross-examination of Crow exposed him for what he is. She paused. "But Morrison is traditional. The lack of a maternal figure might weigh heavy with him." "Can't change what I am." "No, but we've made the strongest case possible." She touched his arm briefly. "Whatever happens, Stone, you did right by those children. Remember that." They reconvened. Judge Morrison took his seat, his expression thoughtful. The courtroom settled into tense silence. "I've heard testimony from both sides," the judge began. "I've reviewed the evidence, the medical reports, the character statements. This is an unusual case, perhaps unprecedented in this territory." He paused, and Lena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mr. Crow, your conduct as temporary guardian was reprehensible. The board will be receiving my recommendation that you never be entrusted with children again. You're dismissed." Crow stood, face mottled with rage and humiliation, and stormed from the courtroom. Judge Morrison watched him go with cold eyes, then continued. "Mr. Hutchins, your motives regarding these children were clearly financial rather than charitable. The court finds your concerns about Mr. Stone's suitability to be without merit and motivated by resentment." Hutchins muttered something under his breath but didn't argue. "As for the board's concerns," Morrison turned to Grayson, "I understand the impulse to ensure children are properly placed, but Mr. Stone has demonstrated both capacity and commitment. The children are measurably healthier, better cared for, and unequivocally happy in his custody." Hope flickered in Lena's chest, fragile as candlelight. "However," Morrison continued, and that single word made her hope sputter, "the court must consider not just present circumstances, but future ones. Mr. Stone is unmarried, living in relative isolation. These children need stability, structure, the civilizing influence of maternal guidance. Your Honor," Walsh started to stand, but Morrison raised a hand. "I'm not finished, Miss Walsh. The court recognizes that traditional family structure is ideal. But the court also recognizes that ideal circumstances are rarely available." He looked directly at the children, his severe expression softening fractionally. "I've presided over many cases involving children, custody disputes, neglect proceedings, orphan placements. I've seen children treated as burdens, as servants, as property. But sitting here today, listening to these 5 children speak about Mr. Stone, I heard something different." He paused, and the silence was absolute. "I heard them speak about someone who chose them, who fought for them, who sees them as family. That's rare, perhaps more valuable than any conventional arrangement." Morrison straightened papers on his bench. "The court finds that the Crowley children are better served remaining in Mr. Stone's custody than any alternative currently available. Custody is hereby awarded to Caleb Stone, with the requirement of quarterly evaluations for the first year to ensure continued appropriate care." The words took a moment to penetrate. Then Mary gasped. Thomas grabbed Lena's hand, and the twins went very still in that way they had when processing overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Stone," Morrison continued, "you are now legally responsible for 5 children. That's no small undertaking. The court expects you to provide education, moral guidance, and preparation for their futures. Miss Walsh will file the necessary paperwork making this official." Stone stood slowly, as though testing whether his legs would hold. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. Raising children is harder than running any ranch. But Morrison's expression held something like approval. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell and chaos erupted. The children rushed to Stone, all of them speaking at once, relief and joy making them loud after weeks of careful restraint. Walsh was shaking Stone's hand, saying something about paperwork and formalities. Jack, who'd been sitting in the back, appeared with his weathered face creased in a rare smile. Stone stood in the center of it all, 5 children pressing close, and Lena saw his eyes were wet. "We won," Mary said, wonder in her voice. "We actually won." "We get to stay," Thomas added. "Together. Actually, together." Ivy and James said nothing, but their arms wrapped around Stone's waist spoke volumes. And Lena felt something break loose in her chest, the fear she'd carried since her mother died, the certainty that safety was temporary and family was fragile. It cracked apart, and what flooded through was too big for tears, too vast for words. "Thank you," she managed, looking up at Stone. "Thank you for fighting." "Didn't do it alone," Stone's voice was rough. "You all fought too. Stood up there and told the truth even though you were scared. That took courage." "We learned from you," Lena said simply. They left the courthouse together, emerging into Wyoming sunshine that seemed brighter than before. Townspeople watched from doorways and windows, some resentful, some grudgingly approving, most just curious about the man who'd upended convention and won. Mrs. Hartford appeared as they reached the wagon, her expression complex. "Mr. Stone, perhaps I misjudged the situation." "Perhaps you did," Stone agreed, not unkindly. "But judgments can change, same as circumstances. Good day, Mrs. Hartford." He helped the children into the wagon with gentle hands, then climbed up himself. Jack took the reins, having driven his own wagon to town, and the 2 vehicles rolled out of Bitter Creek side by side. The ride home was jubilant. Mary sang a song their mother had taught her, and for the first time it didn't hurt to remember. Thomas peppered Stone with questions about ranch operations, already thinking ahead to his future there. The twins sat close together, holding hands and smiling their rare, identical smiles. Lena watched Stone's profile as he drove, saw the tension finally bleeding from his shoulders. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing, just thank you, for real, for all of it." "You already thanked me." "So I'm thanking you again." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face into something almost young. "Then you're welcome. Again." The ranch appeared in the distance, solid and real and theirs. Home. The word settled in Lena's chest with certainty now, no longer fragile hope but established fact. Bear greeted them with ecstatic barking, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. They tumbled out of the wagon into the dog's enthusiastic welcome, into the familiar smells of home, hay and leather, and the sage that grew wild on the hills. That night, Stone cooked a celebratory dinner. Steaks from his best cattle, potatoes from the garden, pie Jack had picked up from the bakery in town. They ate at the kitchen table, all talking at once, interrupting each other with memories of the day's testimony and the judge's final ruling. "Did you see Crow's face when the judge dismissed him?" Thomas crowed. "I thought Hutchins might explode when Morrison called him out," Lena added. "And when you said beauty matters," Thomas turned to Mary, "I thought Mrs. Hartford was going to cry." The laughter came easy, released after weeks of tension. Stone sat at the head of the table watching his children, and they were his now, legally and actually, with an expression of quiet contentment. After dinner, they gathered in the main room. Stone lit the fire even though it was summer, because fires meant comfort and celebration both. The children sprawled on the floor, tired but too keyed up for sleep. "Stone," Ivy said eventually, her voice thoughtful. "What Morrison said about needing a mother, did that bother you?" Stone considered carefully. "It bothered me that he thinks there's only one right way to make a family. But no, it didn't bother me enough to doubt this was right." "Do you think we need a mother?" James asked. "I think you need people who love you and care for you and help you grow. Whether that's a mother, a father, both, or something else entirely, that's less important than the love and care themselves." "Do you love us?" Mary asked. "You said you didn't before." That you were committed but didn't love us yet. The question hung in the warm air. Stone met 5 pairs of expectant eyes, these children who'd become his responsibility, and then, somewhere along the way, something more. Yes, he said quietly. I love you. All of you. Don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe the first day, maybe gradually. But yes, you're my family now, my children, and I love you. Mary launched herself at him, and the others followed. 5 children piling onto one surprised rancher, all of them laughing and crying at once. Stone held them as best he could, his arms not quite wide enough to encompass them all, but trying anyway. Eventually they settled, the initial euphoria fading to comfortable exhaustion. The children drifted toward bed one by one, each stopping to hug Stone goodnight. When only Lena remained, she hesitated at the stairs. Can I ask you something? Always. That day at the auction, when you stepped forward, did you know that it would come to this? That you'd end up loving us? Stone was quiet for a long moment. No, I just knew I couldn't watch you be split apart. Couldn't let another child suffer because an adult failed to act. He looked at her steadily. But I'm glad it came to this. Glad you're here. All of you. Me too. Lena smiled. Good night, Stone. Good night, Lena. She climbed the stairs to her room, in her home, with her family sleeping safe nearby. She changed into her nightgown, brushed her hair with the brush that was hers, and climbed into the bed that was hers. Through the open window came the sounds of Wyoming night, crickets and distant coyotes and the whisper of wind through grass. Familiar sounds now, comforting instead of alien. Downstairs, Stone sat in the darkened main room and thought about the day. About 5 children testifying with courage beyond their years. About a judge who'd seen past convention to recognize what truly mattered. About the moment he'd admitted, out loud and honest, that he loved them. He thought about Samuel, wondered if his brother was watching somehow. Hoped Sam understood that this mad decision, this sudden family, had healed something Caleb thought was broken beyond repair. The failure that had haunted him for 15 years felt different now. Not gone. It would never be gone entirely, but balanced against success. Against 5 children who'd stood unwanted on an auction platform and now slept safe under his roof, legally and permanently his. He'd set out to save them. Somewhere along the way, they'd saved him right back. Stone finished his whiskey, checked the doors and windows from habit, then climbed the stairs. He paused outside each child's room, listening to the soft sounds of sleep, making sure they were real and present and his. In the largest corner bedroom, Lena lay awake, watching moonlight paint patterns on the ceiling. She thought about her mother, about her father, about all they'd lost. The grief was still there, would always be there, but now it existed alongside something else. Hope, belonging, the certainty that she and her siblings had found their place. They'd been unwanted, sold like livestock, fought over in a courtroom. And now they were home. Outside, stars blazed across the vast Wyoming sky. The land stretched endless in all directions, hard and beautiful, and exactly where they belonged. Inside the White House, nestled against Pine Hills, 6 people slept, 5 children, and the man who'd chosen them, who'd fought for them, who'd given them the one thing they'd never had before, a future, together, permanent and sure. The summer heat had passed its peak, autumn waiting just beyond the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, the daily work of building a life together. But tonight, for the first time since that scorching afternoon when hope had nearly evaporated entire, they could rest easy. The battle was won. The family was whole. And sometimes, against all odds and expectations, broken people really could build something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. Summer surrendered to autumn in the way it did in Wyoming, sudden and complete, the air turning crisp overnight and the aspens on the hillsides blazing gold against evergreen. 3 months had passed since the courthouse victory. 3 months of settling into rhythms that felt less like adjustment and more like life simply being lived. The teacher Stone had contacted, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, arrived in early September. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and sharper wit who taught in a one-room schoolhouse for 40 years before retiring. She took one look at the children gathered nervously in Stone's study and declared them adequately intelligent but desperately behind, which is hardly their fault. She set up lessons 3 days a week, riding out from town in a buggy Stone had purchased for use. The children took to her immediately. She had no patience for nonsense, but infinite patience for genuine effort, and she treated their questions with the seriousness they deserved. Thomas has a natural head for figures, she told Stone after the first month. Should consider sending him to university eventually. Lena's writing shows real promise. She thinks in stories, sees connections others miss. Mary needs confidence more than instruction, but that'll come with time. And those twins, she shook her head with something like wonder. They're reading at levels well beyond their age, something special there. Stone absorbed this with quiet pride. His children were thriving, growing into themselves in ways the cramped fear of before had never allowed. But it was Ivy who would uncover the secret that changed everything. It happened on a cool October afternoon. The children were helping Jack repair a section of fence on the north pasture, and Ivy had wandered toward the creek for water. She stopped at a cluster of cottonwoods, her attention caught by something carved into the bark. Letters, old and weathered but still legible. Initials enclosed in a heart. CS plus MW. Below that, a date, June 1868. Ivy traced the carving with careful fingers, then looked around. 20 yards away, hidden in tall grass, she found a foundation. Stones arranged in a rectangle, the remnants of what had once been a small structure. A line shack, maybe, or something else. She returned to the fence line where Stone was demonstrating proper wire tension to Thomas. There's a foundation by the creek, she said without preamble, and a carving on a tree. Your initials and someone else's, MW. Stone went very still. Jack, working nearby, looked up sharply. Show me, Stone said quietly. They walked to the spot together. Stone, Jack, and all 5 children, drawn by curiosity and the weight in Stone's voice. He stood before the carved tree for a long moment, his hand resting on the bark like he was touching something precious and painful both. Molly Winters, he said finally. This was our place. The children waited, sensing the importance of what was being shared. We were engaged, Stone continued, his voice distant with memory. Planned to marry in the summer of 1868. This foundation, I was building us a house here, small starter place until I could afford better. She'd come out from town on weekends, help with the work. We'd sit under these trees and plan our future. He paused. Then Samuel died, and I wasn't the same after. Couldn't be. The guilt, the grief, it changed me. Made me hard in ways Molly couldn't understand. What happened to her? Mary asked softly. She tried. For months she tried to reach whatever was left of the man she'd agreed to marry. But I'd locked myself away from everyone, including her. Eventually she gave up, married a merchant in Cheyenne. Last I heard she had 3 children and a good life. Stone's smile was sad. She deserved better than what I could give her then. Do you still love her? Lena asked. No, I did once, but that was a different version of both of us. I'm glad she found happiness. He turned from the tree facing the children. I'm telling you this because you should know. I tried to have a family before, failed at it because I let grief consume me. But this time, with you, I'm not failing. I won't. Ivy studied him with those unnerving dark eyes. She would have been our mother, if things had been different. Maybe. Though that would mean you'd have different lives entirely. I wouldn't trade that for anything. The moment settled, then James spoke for the first time in days. He went through periods of silence that worried everyone except Ivy, who understood them. The carving says June 1868, he observed. Samuel died that same year? February, 4 months before we were supposed to marry. And you've been alone since then, 15 years. Yes. James walked to the foundation, stood looking at the scattered stones. You were building something and stopped. Left it unfinished because it hurt too much to continue. Stone nodded slowly, seeing where this was going. But we're building something now, James continued, his quiet voice somehow carrying weight. All of us together. And this one, you're finishing. Even when it's hard, even when you're scared you'll fail again. The simplicity of it, the way James had distilled 15 years of grief and guilt and redemption into a few sentences, struck everyone silent. "Yes," Stone said hoarsely. "This one, I'm finishing." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Stone returned to the foundation alone. He stood in the autumn darkness, remembering Molly's laugh, her plans, the future they'd sketched together under these same trees. It felt like another life, distant as stars. Jack found him there an hour later, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. "Thought you might need company," the foreman said, pouring generous measures. They drank in companionable silence, then Jack spoke. "You're doing right by those kids, Caleb. Better than right. They're lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have them. They gave me reason to—" Stone paused, searching for words. "To finish what I started. Not the house with Molly, but the life I was supposed to have. Family, purpose, something beyond just surviving each day." Samuel would be proud. "I hope so." Stone took a long swallow. "I spent 15 years convinced I'd failed him irredeemably, that nothing could balance that scale. But maybe giving these 5 children what I couldn't give him is as close to redemption as I'll get." "It's more than that," Jack said firmly. "It's not about redemption anymore. It's about love. You love those kids, and they love you back. That's its own thing, not payment for old debts." Stone absorbed this, turned it over in his mind. Maybe Jack was right. Maybe the weight he'd carried could finally be set down. The first snow came in late October, early even for Wyoming. The children woke to a world transformed, white and glittering and magical. Mary squealed with delight. The twins immediately began planning snow forts, and Thomas asked if they could learn to ski like he'd read about in books. Stone stood on the porch with his coffee, watching them tumble into the yard like puppies, and felt his chest tighten with something too big for words. This was what he'd been missing. Not romance or traditional family structure, but the simple joy of children experiencing wonder. Lena appeared at his shoulder, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. At 13 now, her birthday had passed quietly in September. She was taller, steadier, growing into the young woman she'd become. "They're happy," she said, watching her siblings. "They are." "So are you. Happy, I mean." Stone glanced at her. "What makes you say that?" "You smile more. Real smiles, not the polite ones you gave people in town. And you sing sometimes when you're working. Didn't used to do that. Didn't have much to sing about before. And now you do." "Yes." He met her eyes. "Now I do." The winter quarterly evaluation came in November. Mr. Grayson arrived looking resigned to finding everything in order, which he did. The children were healthy, educated, clearly thriving. The house was warm and well-maintained. Stone had even hired a part-time housekeeper, a widow from town named Mrs. Chen, who needed work and didn't care about gossip, to help with cooking and laundry. "Everything appears satisfactory," Grayson admitted, making notes. "The children have obviously adjusted well. No concerns to report." "Does that mean the evaluations can stop?" Stone asked. "After the final one in February, yes. Barring any significant changes in circumstances, the board will close the case." Grayson hesitated. "For what it's worth, Mr. Stone, I'm glad to have been wrong about this situation." It was as close to an apology as Stone would get. He accepted it with a nod. Christmas came, and with it, a revelation. Stone had never been much for holidays. 15 years of solitary Christmases had made them just another day. But the children's excitement was infectious. They decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, baked cookies with Mrs. Chen's help, made gifts for each other from scraps and imagination. Stone found himself swept up in it, riding to town for supplies, helping string popcorn for the tree Thomas and Jack had cut from the north section. On Christmas Eve, gathered around that tree with 5 children and the warmth of fire and family, Stone felt something shift. The last piece of the wall he'd built around his heart crumbled entirely. "I have something for all of you," he said when the homemade gifts had been exchanged. "Been working on it for weeks. Wasn't sure how to present it, but—" He pulled papers from his desk. "I've filed formal adoption papers, making it legal beyond custody. You'll be Crowleys by birth, but Stones by choice, if you want." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lena spoke, her voice thick. You want to adopt us? Actually adopt us? I do. You're already my children in every way that matters, but this makes it permanent, legal. Means you carry my name, inherit my property, have all the rights and protections actual children have. He looked at each of them. But only if you want it. It's your choice. Yes, Thomas spoke immediately. Of course, yes. Please, Mary added, tears streaming down her face. The twins nodded together, their rare smiles breaking across both faces simultaneously. And Lena crossed to Stone and wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. Yes. Yes. The adoption was finalized in February, the same month as the final evaluation. Judge Morrison presided over the brief ceremony, and this time his smile was genuine. Caleb Stone, you are hereby granted full parental rights and responsibilities for Lena, Thomas, Mary, Ivy, and James Crowley, who shall henceforth be known as Lena Stone, Thomas Stone, Mary Stone, Ivy Stone, and James Stone. May you all build a good life together. The gavel fell, and this time the children knew to cheer. They were Stones now, officially and permanently. No more evaluations, no more uncertainty, just family, solid and sure. Spring arrived with its usual chaos, calving season, planting, repairs from winter damage. The children threw themselves into ranch work with enthusiasm. Thomas proved a natural cattleman, patient and observant. Mary's garden expanded to include flowers alongside vegetables, bringing color to the practical landscape. The twins developed an almost supernatural ability to locate lost cattle, their silent communication translating somehow to understanding animal behavior. And Lena was discovering her own path. Mrs. Hartwick had encouraged her writing, and she'd begun documenting ranch life, family stories, the small dramas of their daily existence. Stone found her one evening in the study, surrounded by papers. What's all this? He asked. Our story, how we got here, what it's been like. Mrs. Hartwick says I should submit some pieces to newspapers, magazines, that people might want to read about. She gestured vaguely. All of this. About an unconventional family making their way in Wyoming. About unwanted children finding home. About second chances and chosen family, and she looked up at him. About the man who saw 5 kids on an auction block and decided they deserved better. Stone's throat tightened. I'm not sure I'm hero material, Lena. That's exactly what makes you one. You don't think you are. She gathered the papers. Can I read you something? He settled into the chair across from her desk, his father's desk, which was now hers for writing. Lena found the page she wanted and began to read. The day we became unwanted was the day heat pressed down like judgment itself. We stood on that platform, 5 children nobody wanted to claim, and watched our future narrow to nothing. Then a man stepped forward who didn't see unwanted children. He saw people worth fighting for. That man became our father, not through blood, but through choice, which might be the purest form of family there is. She looked up. It's rough still, needs work. But that's the heart of it. What you did for us. What we became together. Stone sat quiet for a long moment, emotion rolling through him like weather. It's good, Lena. Really good. And true. Though you should know, you made it easy to fight for you. All of you did. We weren't easy. We were scared and damaged and difficult. You were children who'd been through hell. That's not the same as being difficult. He leaned forward. Listen to me. You were never unwanted. The world just didn't know how to want you properly. That was the world's failure, not yours. Lena's eyes filled, but she was smiling. That's going in the story too. By summer, 1 year had passed since the auction. They marked it quietly, no celebration exactly, but acknowledgement. The children had grown visibly, filled out, gained the healthy color of people who ate regular meals and slept without fear. The house bore evidence of their presence in every room. Mary's flowers in vases, Thomas's books stacked on tables, the twins' quiet modifications to make spaces their own, Lena's papers always somewhere nearby. Stone himself had changed too. The harsh edges had softened, the isolation replaced by constant, cheerful chaos. He'd learned to braid Mary's hair, to discuss literature with Lena, to let Thomas make mistakes as part of learning, to give the twins space for their silent communications without trying to force them into conventional interaction. He'd learned to be a father. One evening in late July, almost exactly a year after that first night, they gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become tradition, the whole family together as day surrendered to night, sharing the quiet before bed. "Stone," Ivy said into the comfortable silence, "do you remember what you said when we first got here? About commitment being a choice you make every day?" "I remember." "You've chosen us every day for a year now. More than a year, counting from the auction. Do you ever regret it, the choice?" Stone looked at the 5 faces turned toward him, these children who'd become his entire world without him quite noticing when it happened. "Not once," he said firmly. "Best decision I ever made, taking you home that day. Changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined." "Changed ours too," Thomas said. "We went from having nothing to having everything that matters." "We have each other," Mary added softly. "That's what matters," James agreed, one of his rare verbal contributions that somehow carried more weight than longer speeches. Lena stood, crossing to lean against Stone's chair. He put his arm around her shoulders automatically now, the gesture that had once felt foreign become natural as breathing. "We should do something," she said. "Mark the anniversary properly. Not the auction. Nobody wants to celebrate that day, but maybe the day we first arrived here. The day we started becoming a family. What did you have in mind?" "A picture. All of us together. Something permanent." Stone considered. He'd avoided photographs since Samuel died, couldn't bear the idea of capturing moments that felt temporary. But nothing about this felt temporary anymore. "I'll arrange it," he said. "We'll go to town next week, have a proper family photograph made." The following Tuesday, they dressed in their best clothes, the children in outfits Stone had commissioned from the dressmaker and tailor who'd finally decided his money was acceptable regardless of gossip. They rode to town in the wagon, drawing stares as always, but the quality of those stares had shifted over the year. Less judgment, more curiosity. Some grudging acceptance. The photographer was a serious man who positioned them carefully. Stone seated with Mary on his lap, Thomas and Lena standing on either side, the twins flanking them all. Bear had insisted on being included and sat at Stone's feet, patient as ever. "Don't move," the photographer instructed. "Hold steady." The flash powder ignited with a pop and a puff of smoke, capturing them frozen in that moment. When the photograph was developed days later, it showed exactly what they'd become. A family unconventional by most standards, but undeniably real. Stone's hand rested on Mary's shoulder. Lena stood tall and confident. Thomas looked every inch the young rancher he was becoming. The twins wore matching expressions of calm contentment, and Stone himself, Stone looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way the camera couldn't lie about. He had copies made, sent one to Mrs. Hartwick, another to Judge Morrison, kept the original in a frame on the mantel where everyone could see it. Their family, documented and real. Autumn rolled around again, bringing with it preparations for another winter. The children had full responsibility now for certain aspects of ranch operation. Thomas managed the feed calculations, Mary handled the root cellar and preserving, Lena kept the household accounts. The twins maintained the horse barn. They were part of the operation, not just residents of it. One October evening, after the younger children had gone to bed, Lena found Stone in his study with a letter. His expression was complicated. "What is it?" He handed her the paper. It was from Molly Winters, who'd become Molly Brighton, who Stone had almost married 15 years ago. The letter was brief but warm. She'd heard about the adoption, about the 5 children he'd taken in. She wrote that she was glad he'd found family, that the grief that had consumed him seemed to have finally released its hold. She wished them all happiness and mentioned that if he was ever in Cheyenne, her family would welcome him. "Are you going to write back?" Lena asked. "I think so. It's kind what she wrote, reaching out after all these years." He took the letter back, folded it carefully. "Strange how life works. Back then I thought losing her was the end of everything. Couldn't imagine being happy again. And now? Now I know there are different kinds of happiness. What I had with Molly was one version, young love, simple futures. What I have with you children is something else entirely, maybe better. Certainly more surprising. He smiled. I loved Molly once, but I love you all more. Different, but more. Lena settled into the chair across from him, the way she did when they had these evening talks. Do you think she would have wanted children if you'd... Yes. She talked about it often. Wanted a house full. Then maybe everything worked out how it was supposed to. She got her house full with someone else, and you got yours with us. That's a very generous way of looking at 15 years of grief and isolation. Or it's just true. Sometimes the path to where you're supposed to be isn't straight. Lena paused. Mrs. Hartwick asked me today what I wanted to do when I grew up. I told her I wanted to write, maybe journalism or books. She said I should consider university in a few years. Stone sat up straighter. University? You said Thomas should go eventually for business. Why not me for writing? No reason. None at all. He stopped, emotion catching him. I just never imagined you all growing up, leaving. Seems like yesterday you were standing on that platform. We're not leaving for years yet. And even when we do, Lena met his eyes steadily, this will always be home. You'll always be our father. That doesn't change just because we grow up. Promise? Promise. The years that followed proved Lena right. Thomas went to agricultural college in Laramie at 17, studying modern ranching techniques and business management. He returned every summer to implement what he'd learned, transforming the Stone Ranch into one of the most profitable in the territory. Mary discovered a talent for teaching and began helping Mrs. Hartwick with younger students. By 15, she was running her own small school on the ranch for children from surrounding homesteads, the house finally filled with the sound of young voices Stone had once built it for. The twins remained closest to home, developing a horse breeding program that gained regional recognition. Their ability to gentle even the most difficult animals became almost legendary, and buyers traveled from 3 territories to purchase horses trained by the Stone twins. And Lena's writing found an audience. Her pieces about frontier life, about family and belonging and second chances, were published in newspapers across the West. At 18, a publisher in Denver offered her a contract for a book. She wrote it in Stone's study, the same space where he'd once isolated himself from the world, now transformed into a place of creation instead of hiding. The book, when published, was titled Unwanted No More: Finding Family on the Frontier. It told their story: the auction, the fear, Stone's unexpected intervention, the building of family from broken pieces. It became a modest success, read by people who saw their own struggles reflected in its pages. Stone kept a copy on his desk always, the dedication page memorized, though he pretended not to have read it repeatedly. For Caleb Stone, who taught 5 unwanted children that family is built on choice, commitment, and the courage to finish what you start. You're the father we needed, the man we admire, and the heart of everything we've become. On Lena's 20th birthday, Stone gave her the deed to the foundation by the creek. Build something there, he said. Whatever you want. The house I started with Molly was meant for a different future, but the land remembers love. Maybe it's ready for a new story. Lena built a writing cabin, small and perfect, with windows overlooking the water. She worked there in good weather, producing stories and articles and eventually another book. And sometimes when she needed to think, she'd trace the old carving on the cottonwood, CS plus MW, and think about paths not taken and the strange grace of second chances. Stone grew older, his hair going fully gray, his movements slower but still capable. He stepped back from daily ranch operations gradually, letting Thomas take over management while he focused on the horse breeding program with the twins. He taught Mary's students about wildlife and weather, his gruff patience making him unexpectedly good with children. And he was happy. Genuinely, bone-deep happy in ways he'd never imagined possible during those 15 years of isolation. The 20th anniversary of the auction arrived in high summer. All 5 children, adults now, but still his children, gathered at the ranch for the occasion. Thomas brought his wife, a teacher he'd met in Laramie. Mary brought her fiancé, a neighboring rancher's son who made her laugh. The twins remained unmarried but utterly content, their partnership with each other complete. And Lena, visiting from Denver where she'd moved for her writing career, brought copies of her latest book fresh from the publisher. They gathered on the porch that evening, just like old times, watching the sun set over the land they'd all come to call home. 20 years, Thomas said, shaking his head. Hard to believe. 20 years since you paid good money for 5 unwanted children, Mary teased Stone gently. Best investment I ever made, Stone replied, and meant it absolutely. Do you ever wonder, Ivy asked, what would have happened if someone else had taken us? If we'd been separated that day? No, Stone said firmly, because we weren't separated. We're here, together, and that's all that matters. Still, James mused, he talked more now, but never excessively. It's remarkable how one decision changed everything. You stepping forward that day. You gave us more than a home, Lena said softly. You gave us proof that we mattered, that we were worth fighting for. That changed everything about how we saw ourselves and what we thought we could become. Stone looked at the 5 faces around him. These children he'd claimed on a scorching summer day, who'd claimed him right back. They'd grown into remarkable adults, successful and happy and kind. They'd built lives and families and futures, and through it all, they'd remained connected to each other and to him, the unconventional family they'd chosen to become. I didn't give you anything you didn't already have, he said. The strength, the courage, the ability to overcome. That was yours from the start. I just provided the space for it to grow. You provided the love, Mary corrected gently. The space was nice, but the love was everything. As darkness settled over the Wyoming landscape, they sat together in the comfortable silence of people who knew each other down to the bone. Bear, the 3rd dog to bear the name, descended from the original, slept at Stone's feet. Lights glowed warm in the house where 5 unwanted children had found home 20 years ago. Stone thought about that first night, about his fear and uncertainty, about 5 frightened children sleeping on his floor because they couldn't yet bear separation. About the long journey from that moment to this one, the challenges, the victories, the slow building of trust into love. He thought about Samuel, about the guilt he'd carried for so long, finally laid to rest through the act of saving 5 children. He couldn't have saved one. About Molly and the life they'd never built together, which had somehow made room for this different, deeper family. About how finishing what you start sometimes means starting something entirely new and unexpected. Stone? Lena's voice drew him from his thoughts. Yes? Thank you. For everything. But especially for choosing us when nobody else wanted to. He reached over, squeezed her hand. Thank you for letting me. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant against the vast darkness. Inside the house, the photograph from 18 years ago still held pride of place on the mantel. A family frozen in time, documenting the moment they'd officially become what they'd already been in every way that mattered. And outside, on the porch they'd gathered on countless evenings, Caleb Stone sat surrounded by his children and felt the weight of all those years of grief and isolation finally lift entirely. He was 70 now, his body showing the wear of a hard life and harder land. But his heart was full in ways he'd never dreamed possible. They'd been unwanted once, these 5 souls who'd become his entire world. Stood on a platform in summer heat while grown men calculated their worth in dollars and labor hours. But one man had stepped forward and seen something different, had seen people worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth loving, and in choosing them, he'd been chosen back. Claimed by 5 children who'd taught him that family wasn't about blood or convention or following someone else's rules. It was about commitment and courage and finishing what you started, even when it was hard. It was about love in its purest form, unconditional, chosen, permanent as the mountains rising in the distance. The summer heat had long since faded into memory, replaced by 20 years of seasons and changes and growth. The children who'd stood unwanted were unwanted no more. Their worth proven not through auction prices, but through the lives they'd built and the love they'd found. And the man who'd saved them had been saved right back, his isolation shattered by laughter and questions and the beautiful chaos of family. He'd finished what he'd started all those years ago when he claimed 5 strangers as his own. He'd built a home, a real one, filled with love and life and the certain knowledge that some things, some people, are worth any price, any fight, any risk. As night deepened over the Wyoming ranch, Caleb Stone closed his eyes and listened to his children talk and laugh around him. And he knew, with the certainty of someone who'd walked through grief to the other side, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Surrounded by family. Home, at last. Complete. The story that had begun with 5 unwanted children and one scarred man ended the only way it could, with all of them whole, all of them loved, all of them finally, permanently, home.